I was 81 when I finally spoke of it. The words had burned my throat for decades, like acid trapped behind my teeth. But that night, as I sat in my recliner, watching the wind curl the curtains in my quiet Michigan farmhouse, I heard him again. That voice. That night. I was just a girl when my mother died. 14. It was spring. She'd been sick for a while, and the cancer finally took her breath away one rainy morning, right after breakfast. I remember the cereal box still open on the table, her cup of tea going cold, and her slippers at the foot of the couch. I'd gone to school, thinking she was just tired. When I came back, I found a neighbor holding my hand and telling me to be strong. That evening, my stepfather, Vernon, didn't cry. He didn't even speak. He smoked 2 whole packs of cigarettes out on the porch, staring out at nothing. I watched him from the window, clutching my pillow like a shield. I was scared, but I didn't know why yet. He didn't speak to me again until the house went quiet, after everyone left, the casseroles delivered, the polite hugs shared, the murmured condolences fading into silence. That's when I saw his shadow in my doorway. He smelled of whiskey and Old Spice, and his breath was wet with spit and rage. His eyes weren't sad. They were hungry. "I'm gonna defile you tonight," he hissed. Just like that. Like a demon. A monster standing in my mother's slippers. I froze. My body left me. My thoughts screamed, but no sound came out. He stepped into the room. I ran. I don't know how my legs moved, but I bolted down the stairs barefoot, out into the rain, not stopping until my feet were blistered raw. I stayed in the woods behind the Johnsons' barn that night, crouched under a tree, shivering and shaking, biting my fist to stay silent. He looked for me. I heard him calling, shouting, pretending to be worried. But his voice cracked when he cursed my name into the dark. That was the night I stopped being a child. But I didn't tell anyone. Because who would believe me? Vernon was a deacon at church. He wore a tie every Sunday. He gave candy to the kids and cut his lawn twice a week. And me. I was the awkward stepdaughter, quiet, bookish, weird. My mother's daughter, not his blood. So I went back. I returned home the next day, mud up to my knees and tears dried stiff on my cheeks. He was in the kitchen making pancakes. He smiled like nothing had happened. "You gave me quite the scare," he said, flipping a pancake. "Don't do that again." I nodded. I never slept again with my door unlocked. But I stayed. I stayed for years. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because I didn't know how to speak the horror. Because the world was cruel to girls like me. And he knew it. He never tried it again. But he didn't need to. Every night, the threat lingered in the air like mold. His footsteps near my door. His fingers brushing my arm. His breath on the back of my neck as he reached past me in the kitchen. I left at 17 with a duffel bag and a $20 bill. I made a life for myself in silence. I got married. Had a child. Kept Vernon buried in a box so deep, even I forgot the smell of it. Until last week. Until I saw him again. 89 years old. In a wheelchair. At a nursing home just an hour away. My friend Donna works there. She called me. "Clara," she whispered over the phone. "There's a man here who swears he raised you." Vernon. Still alive. Still grinning. Still telling people I was his little girl. I dropped the phone. The room spun. Everything came back. The doorway. The whisper. The rain. The mud. The fire in my lungs as I ran. I thought he was dead. I had prayed for it. But now I had to decide. Do I confront him? Or do I finally run? One last time? Because he saw me yesterday. He looked me in the eyes as Donna introduced us. And he smiled. I told you I'd see you again, girl. And this time, he winked. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I was 14 again. Rain drummed on the roof of my farmhouse like it did on the porch that night so long ago. And Vernon's voice crawled out of the shadows. I'm going to defile you tonight. I sat up in bed, sweating, even though it was cold. My old bones ached. My breath was short. But my mind was sharper than ever. That man, that demon, was still alive. Still lying. Still pretending. And I was still letting him win. I made a pot of weak coffee, pulled on my housecoat, and sat by the window until the sun came up. That was always my way of thinking, staring at the sunrise, letting it burn away the fog inside me. When Donna called again that morning, her voice was trembling. I didn't mean to startle you, Clara, she said softly. Vernon told the staff you were his daughter. He's been showing them a photo of you. One from when you were 15. I felt the wind leave my lungs. He carries it in his shirt pocket, she added. Like you were his treasure or something. Like you were his favorite. A photo. That close to the moment he threatened to ruin me? It was like a warning. A reminder that I'd never really left. Did he say anything else? I asked. There was a pause. Donna cleared her throat. He said you were always too pretty to resist. I dropped the mug in my hand. It shattered on the floor. My legs trembled. My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, to run again. But there was nowhere to run anymore. I was too old for fear. I was too tired for silence. So I drove. I didn't even brush my hair. I didn't bother changing from my housecoat. I just got in my beat-up Ford, clutching the steering wheel like a lifeline, and headed down Highway 36 toward the nursing home. The roads were slick with dew, and every mile closer made my heart beat harder. I knew what I had to do. I had to see him. I had to look into those eyes and say everything I never dared to say. When I pulled into the parking lot of Willow Pines Senior Living, my hands were shaking. But my back was straight. My chest lifted with every breath like a soldier going to war. Inside, the scent of antiseptic and warm oatmeal hit me first. Then the laughter of residents playing cards. Then I saw him. He was sitting near the window in a wheelchair, covered in a pale green blanket. His hair was thin now, skin loose, eyes dull, until they landed on me. Clara, he said, like he'd seen me yesterday, like nothing had ever happened, like I was still his little secret. I didn't say a word. I just stared. I watched his lips curl into that same snake-like smile, the one that made my stomach knot even now. You came back, he whispered. I swallowed hard. I didn't come back, I said. I came to look at the man who ruined me and see if you still breathe. He blinked, just once. But the smile stayed. They never believed you, did they? He said, his voice low and slithering. All those years. You never told, huh? I didn't answer that. Because he was right. I hadn't. But not because I was weak. Because I had something stronger now. I had time, experience, and a name that stood on its own. My mother died, I said, voice shaking. And you tried to kill what was left of her by breaking me. His smile wavered. Not much. Just a flicker. But I saw it. I took a step closer. You don't scare me anymore, Vernon. Oh, I think I do, he rasped. That's when I leaned in, close enough that he could see every wrinkle on my face, proof that I'd survived, that I'd outlived every demon. You're in a wheelchair, I whispered, in a place where people forget your name every morning. But I remember. And then I walked out. I didn't cry until I got home. I didn't scream until I locked the door behind me. And I didn't start shaking until I pulled out the shoebox from the top of my closet, the one I hadn't touched in over 50 years. Inside, a letter I once wrote but never mailed. To the police. To the pastor. To anyone who would listen. I reread it, hands trembling, heart pounding. I had kept the letter because I'd never found the courage to send it. But now it was time. Not just for Vernon, but for me. Because what Vernon didn't know was that I wasn't the only one he tried to ruin. And I wasn't the only one still alive. The envelope was yellow with age. The ink had faded into soft blue ghosts, but my handwriting still danced in curls and loops across the page, neater than I remembered. I wrote it when I was 22, just after my wedding, just before I burned my journal. I had just moved into our first little house back then, newly married to Michael, a kind man with gentle hands and a voice that never rose in anger. He never knew the truth. I never told him what Vernon did. I thought if I kept it buried deep enough, it would rot and vanish like bad roots in good soil. But bad roots don't die. They fester. And Vernon had grown into a tree full of poison, still reaching. My fingers shook as I read my own words aloud. To whom it may concern. I'm writing to report a crime that happened when I was 14. My stepfather, Vernon Dale, threatened to assault me the day my mother died. I stopped there. My voice broke. I folded the letter again, tight, and clutched it to my chest. For so long, that letter had been my only power, my only proof. But now it was time to use it. The next morning, I took it to the sheriff's office in town. Sheriff Louise Buckner was a tall, broad-shouldered woman in her 60s with silver hair and a reputation for getting things done. She'd known me for decades, had even helped Michael build our back fence years ago. When I stepped into her office and sat across from her desk, she tilted her head. "Clara, everything okay?" I handed her the envelope. Her face changed as she read. She didn't interrupt me once as I told her everything. The rain, the doorway, the whisper, the chase into the woods, the photo in his shirt pocket, the sick grin he still wore today. She just listened. Like no one ever had before. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled long and slow. "You should have come to me sooner." "I know," I whispered. "But I was a child. And he had everyone fooled." She tapped her pen on the letter. "You still want justice?" "I want peace," I said. "But I want him stopped too." Louise nodded. "Let me check something." She disappeared into the back, came back 20 minutes later with a thin file. "He's been reported twice. Nursing aides. Both young women. One said he touched her thigh during a sponge bath. The other said he kept calling her by your name." My stomach dropped. "He's not just a memory anymore," I whispered. "No," Louise said. "He's a predator who's still looking for prey." That night, I couldn't sleep again. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew something now. I wasn't his only victim. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this fight. I needed answers. I needed others who might have known the real Vernon, behind the church smile, behind the charity work, behind the grieving widower act he wore like a second skin. So I made a few calls. First to Sister Beatrice, the church secretary who'd always had a sharp tongue and sharper memory. Then to Thomas Ray, who'd lived next door to us in 1957. And finally, I tracked down someone I never expected to find. Charlotte Blackwell. She was a girl who used to clean our house twice a week after my mother got sick. She was 15, same age as me back then, but she was quieter. Meeker. Always kept her eyes on the floor. I hadn't seen her in over 60 years. When I found her number in a church newsletter, I dialed with trembling fingers. "Hello?" Her voice croaked, frail but still familiar. "Charlotte, it's Clara Dale. From St. Mary's Church. From Vernon's house. There was silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "I've been waiting for this call," she whispered. My knees buckled. I sat down hard in my chair, gripping the phone like a lifeline. "You too," I whispered. Charlotte began to cry. For the next 20 minutes, she told me everything. How Vernon cornered her one evening while I was upstairs doing homework. How he threatened to tell her father she was stealing from the pantry if she didn't let him touch her. How he paid her $10 afterward and told her to forget it. How she carried that night for the rest of her life, through 3 marriages, 2 miscarriages, and 1 suicide attempt. I wept with her. And when the call ended, I made a vow. I wasn't going to bury this anymore. Vernon may have stolen our voices then, but we were still alive. Still breathing. And I was going to make sure the world finally heard us. The next morning, I called Donna and told her to meet me at the nursing home courtyard. I was ready to face Vernon again, but not alone. This time, I had the letter. This time, I had Charlotte. And this time, I wasn't afraid to speak. But what I didn't expect was that Vernon had prepared something too. When I arrived, he was already sitting in the courtyard. And beside him was a lawyer. A young man in a gray suit, holding a briefcase. Vernon smiled as I approached. "I figured you'd come back," he croaked. "So I brought protection." I narrowed my eyes. "Protection from what?" "From lies," he said, that old twisted grin crawling across his face. "See, Clara, I've got power too. And I don't plan on dying in shame." I took a breath, reached into my coat pocket, and held up the old letter. "You already did," I whispered. "The day you touched me. The day you ruined Charlotte. And the day you thought a signature could save your soul." His eyes widened. For the first time, Vernon looked afraid. But it was too late. Because I had already sent copies. To the police. To the press. To every woman who had ever worked at Willow Pines. Vernon wasn't just facing an old woman anymore. He was facing a storm. The news spread faster than I thought it would. By the following week, the whispers had become conversations. Conversations turned into investigations. And suddenly, Vernon's smiling photo, once hanging in the local church's hallway as a pillar of the community, was taken down. Quietly. But not quietly enough. Donna called me the next morning, breathless. "Clara, it's happening." The nursing home placed Vernon under observation. He's no longer allowed unsupervised contact with female staff. And they're interviewing others. My hands trembled as I gripped the receiver. After all these years, the fire I carried in silence had finally lit the ground beneath his feet. But then she said something that froze my blood. "There's someone else," Donna whispered. "Another girl. Young. One of the interns. She came forward after reading your letter." I closed my eyes, the rage and sorrow mixing in my chest like a storm. He was still doing it. Even in his old age. Even in that wheelchair. Vernon hadn't stopped. He'd just adapted. Found new ways to lurk. New ways to prey. That afternoon, I drove back to Willow Pines. The sky was overcast, the air thick with rain that hadn't fallen yet. I brought Charlotte with me. 65 years had weathered her frame, but she sat next to me like a warrior. She held my hand as we walked through the front doors together. Vernon wasn't in the common room this time. He was isolated. The staff led us to a side room where he sat at a table, hands folded, eyes blank. He looked smaller now. Diminished. Not from age, but from exposure. "You're both here," he muttered, voice brittle. Charlotte stepped forward first. "You told me I was a stupid little maid," she said calmly. "You said no one would care what happened to someone like me." Vernon didn't respond. Charlotte placed an old photograph on the table. It was her, 15 years old, in her cleaning apron, holding a mop. She slid it across to him. "I kept this," she said, "because it was the last day I felt safe in my own skin." Then I stepped forward. "You said I'd never tell," I whispered. "You said I'd forget, that no one would believe me." He looked at me then. Really looked. "I believed you," I said. "Even when I didn't speak it. My body remembered. My soul never forgot." He opened his mouth, maybe to deny it, maybe to beg. But I didn't let him. "Don't say anything," I snapped. "Just listen." I pulled out a small cassette player, an old one I found in my attic. I had recorded a conversation I'd had with another woman Vernon had harassed. She couldn't come in person, but her voice mattered. I pressed play. "His hand was cold," the woman said in the recording. "He touched me when I changed his sheets. I told my supervisor. Nothing happened." Vernon's jaw tightened. The air was thick. Electric. I leaned down so close our faces were nearly level. "This is your legacy," I said. "Not the deacon. Not the neighborhood handyman. Not the Sunday smile. This." Charlotte placed her hand on my shoulder. "You don't own our silence anymore." We left the tape recorder on the table and walked out without another word. Later that evening, I received a letter. It was from the nursing home administration. "Dear Ms. Dale, following multiple testimonies and your written statement, Vernon Dale is being moved to a high monitoring facility. He will no longer have access to vulnerable staff or residents. A formal report has been submitted to local authorities." I stared at the letter for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just breathing. Finally. It wasn't victory in the way I once dreamed it. There were no handcuffs, no courtroom gasps, no Justice TV moment. But it was real. Vernon was caged, by truth. Still that night, as I sat by my fireplace, sipping tea and watching the flames dance, something in me stirred again. Not fear. Curiosity. Why now? Why was I finally strong enough to speak? The answer came quietly, like wind through dry leaves. Because I wasn't alone anymore. The silence I once lived in had turned into a choir. Charlotte, Donna, the intern, the woman on the tape. And maybe more would come. But something else arrived too. An envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Neat. Cold. "You think you've won. But your story isn't the only one I know. You start talking too loud, and I'll start telling what I know about Michael. Michael. My late husband. My gentle, kind Michael. The man who died with my hand in his. What could Vernon know? Or was he bluffing?" I sat frozen, the letter trembling in my hand. Outside, the wind picked up. The storm wasn't over. It had just changed direction. I sat in my kitchen with that anonymous letter spread out on the table like an open wound. The words danced in my mind, circling like vultures over something dead but not yet buried. You start talking too loud, and I'll start telling what I know about Michael. My name is Michael. Gone 12 years now. A man who never raised his voice. Who brought me sunflowers every third Sunday for no reason at all. Who held me the first night I woke up screaming after a nightmare of Vernon's breath on my neck. I had told him nothing. He never asked. He said he didn't need to know what made me flinch at sudden footsteps, only that he would always stand between me and whatever scared me. He loved me in full, even when I gave him broken pieces. And now Vernon was threatening to stain that memory. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees and the letter crumpled in my fist. I watched the moon climb and fall, my heart aching like a bruise. What did Vernon mean? What secret could he possibly hold? At sunrise, I called Sheriff Louise. I read her the letter. There was silence on the other end of the line. "You think it's a bluff?" I asked. Louise exhaled slowly. "Knowing Vernon, no. He's not the kind to throw empty threats. Not unless he's trying to distract you." "From what?" She paused. "Or unless he's really holding something heavy over your head." I pressed my palm to my chest, grounding myself. What could Michael have done? "He was a good man." "Even good men have shadows," Louise said softly. "But Clara, that doesn't mean you have to carry them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. After we hung up, I went to the attic. There, in a dusty cardboard box beneath old winter coats, was a small wooden chest Michael had once locked. He told me it was just boring legal junk. I never questioned it, never had a reason to. Until now. I pried it open with a rusted screwdriver. Inside were 3 items. A set of keys I didn't recognize. A deed to a small cabin in the Upper Peninsula. A bundle of old letters, tied with a red ribbon. I sat on the floor and untied the ribbon with trembling fingers. The letters weren't addressed to me. They were from a woman named Helena. Each one began the same. "Dear Michael, I know we agreed never to contact each other again, but—" My stomach dropped. Helena. A name I'd never heard. But the handwriting was familiar. So was the scent on the paper, lavender and dust. I read each letter slowly. Helena had been pregnant 35 years ago. She said she understood why Michael chose his quiet wife with the haunted eyes. She said she forgave him, that she didn't want money, only silence, for the sake of the boy. A boy. My fingers went numb. Michael had a child I never knew about, and Vernon knew. Suddenly everything made sense. Vernon's threat wasn't about me. It was about the illusion I had built. The life I had stitched together from pain and love. The story I told myself, that I had escaped the darkness, created something good, that nothing bad would ever follow me into old age. But the past doesn't stay buried. It claws. It rises. Especially when someone like Vernon holds the shovel. I called Donna. "I need to see Vernon," I said. "I thought you were done," she said gently. "I thought so too," I replied. "But he's not done with me." An hour later, I walked into his room. He was seated in bed, wrapped in a blanket, a nurse by his side. When he saw me, he grinned like a cat catching a canary. "Told you I had leverage," he rasped. "You don't," I said calmly. "You have rot. And rot smells whether it's whispered or shouted." He chuckled. "So," I said, stepping forward, "what do you know about Helena?" He blinked. The name clearly caught him off guard. "I found the letters," I added. "So I already know about the child. But I want to know why you know." His grin faded. And then he said it. "I introduced them." My knees buckled. "What?" "Helena was my niece. Worked at the gas station down the road. You remember her, short girl, always wore red lipstick. Michael used to come in for gum and conversation. I saw it happen." "You arranged it?" I whispered. "No," he said, eyes twinkling. "But I watched it. I knew it was wrong. He was married to you. But I didn't say a word. Not then. Not after. Because I knew one day I'd need a card to play." He leaned back on his pillows. "And now," he sighed, "I played it." I stared at him, at the shriveled husk of a man who had once loomed over me like death itself. and I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not for him, but for the emptiness he carried. You never had love, I said quietly. Only leverage. Love's for fools, he muttered. Then I'm glad I was one, I whispered. And I walked away. But the next morning, I got another surprise. A knock on the door. A young man stood on my porch. Tall. Blue eyes. Hair like Michael's when he was young. Are you Clara Dale? He asked, voice nervous. I nodded. My name's Benjamin, he said. My mother was Helena. My breath caught. I think, he said softly, we might be family. I stood there, frozen, the morning sun catching the edges of Benjamin's hair like a halo. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks. But the way he looked at me, nervous, open, unsure, reminded me of how Michael used to look at people when he was about to say something kind. He stepped forward, fumbling with a small leather folder in his hands. I don't want to intrude. I found your name in one of my mother's old journals. She passed 6 months ago. I've been trying to make sense of everything. I opened the screen door slowly, my voice rasping through the lump in my throat. Come in, Benjamin. He nodded and stepped into my home, wiping his feet on the mat, just like Michael used to. I stared at his frame, his quiet movements, his awkwardness. Every gesture hit me like a ghost brushing past. We sat at my small kitchen table, the one Michael had built with his own hands decades ago. I poured us some tea, my fingers trembling as I set the cups down. I'm sorry to come like this, Benjamin began. It's just, when I found the letters from your husband, I started digging. And I found out Vernon, your stepfather, he was involved in my mother's life back then. He paid her to leave town when she got pregnant. My jaw tightened. He paid her. Benjamin nodded. She said she took the money because she was scared. She told me Michael wanted to stay in touch, but Vernon told her you were fragile. That you had demons. He made it seem like reaching out would ruin everything. I pressed my palm to my chest. He manipulated her. Like he manipulated all of us. I think so, Benjamin said. She always said she wished she could have met you. But she didn't want to destroy your family. She wouldn't have destroyed anything, I whispered. Michael would have told me. I know he would have, if he hadn't been so afraid of losing what little piece we'd built. Benjamin reached into his leather folder and pulled out a photograph. This is him. My father. Taken the summer before I was born. I stared at it. Michael stood on a dock in a flannel shirt, holding a fishing pole, smiling at someone out of frame. His smile was the same. But his eyes, they looked heavy, as if he was carrying something he never let me see. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. Thank you, I whispered. Benjamin shifted in his seat. I don't know what I'm hoping for, Clara. I don't want to ruin your memories. I guess I wanted to meet the woman he loved. The one he chose to build his life with. You didn't ruin anything, I said gently. You're the part of him I never got to know. You're not a secret, he was. We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea, letting the past settle around us. Then he said something that made my heart twist. Vernon called me once, he murmured. I looked up sharply. What? About 5 years ago. I didn't know who he was. He just said he knew my mother. He said he wanted to meet. I agreed. You met him. He nodded slowly. It was uncomfortable. He asked me strange questions, told me I looked like someone he used to know. Then he said he could tell me who my real father was, for a price. My stomach turned. What did you do? I left. But a week later, I got a letter in the mail. No name, no return address. Just 3 words written in red ink. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. I opened it with shaking fingers. He was married. I looked at Benjamin. You never knew? I had my suspicions, he admitted, but the letter made it real. Still, my mother never spoke his name. Not until she was dying. She protected me, I whispered, even as Vernon tried to hold her hostage with silence. Benjamin nodded. I think she carried the weight, so you didn't have to. A knot formed in my chest. Helena had suffered too. Quietly. Alone. Just like me. Just like Charlotte. Just like so many others. Later that afternoon, I walked Benjamin out to his car. The air was crisp. The leaves had started turning. Before he got in, he turned to me and said, "Would it be all right if I visited again?" I smiled, tears burning my eyes. "I'd like that." As he drove away, I stood on the porch watching the dust trail fade down the road. My heart was full of questions, but also something new. Peace. But peace never lasts long around Vernon. That evening, Donna called again. "Clara, I don't know how to tell you this, but Vernon escaped." I gripped the counter. What? They were transferring him to the high-security care unit. During the handoff, there was a distraction. He got out. They're searching for him now. My blood went cold. He was out there. And if he'd seen Benjamin or heard about him, he'd know that his last card had been played. And he'd be desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. I locked every door and window in the house, pulled the curtains tight, kept the porch light on. My old bones ached, but I stayed up with a baseball bat across my lap. Vernon had haunted my childhood. He would not haunt my twilight years. But as I sat in that chair, watching the trees rustle outside, something strange happened. A letter slid under my front door. No knock. No footsteps. Just a soft whisk and a shadow. I rushed to the door, but no one was there. I bent down and picked it up. It was handwritten, shaky, but unmistakable. "You took everything from me, Clara, but you forgot. I still know where Michael is buried. And I remember what he told me before he died." I fell to my knees, because Michael had died in hospice, surrounded by nurses, holding my hand. Or so I thought. I stared at the letter until my eyes blurred. My hands were trembling so hard, the paper shook like a bird's wing in a storm. The words burned. "I still know where Michael is buried, and I remember what he told me before he died." How could that be? Michael died in a hospice room I visited every single day. I held his hand. I kissed his forehead. I whispered that I forgave him for leaving me so soon. He passed quietly, in the middle of the night, just after I had stepped out to get a nurse. But now, Vernon was suggesting something more. Something else. I called Sheriff Louise immediately. "There was another letter," I told her. "This one says he knows something about Michael's death. That Michael told him something." She was silent for a moment. "Clara, I don't want to scare you, but Vernon was spotted on the South Road near your property 2 hours ago. We're already sweeping the area." "Do you think he's trying to hurt me?" "I think he's trying to control you. And when people like Vernon lose control, they don't go quiet. They explode." That evening, Charlotte came over and sat with me in the living room. We didn't speak much. Just sipped tea, watched the fire crackle, and listened for any sound outside. After a long pause, she said, "You know, Vernon wasn't there the night Michael died, but he did visit the hospice 3 days before." I turned toward her slowly. "How do you know that?" She looked down. "Because I was working the front desk that day. I volunteered there back then, during my recovery. I saw him sign in. I leaned forward. Did you hear anything? She nodded slowly. They argued. I only caught one sentence. Michael said, "Don't ever tell her. She deserves peace." My blood froze. What had Michael wanted to keep from me? And what had Vernon held on to all these years, twisting it into one final weapon? Later that night, the wind howled like wolves, and the air grew thick and still. Then came the sound. Crunch. Snap. Footsteps. I moved quietly to the window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. A figure stood at the edge of the woods, barely visible. A man, bent, watching. Vernon. I grabbed the phone, but the line was dead. Of course it was. The porch light flickered, then turned off. My heart thundered in my chest. I stepped back, baseball bat in hand, my breath shallow. Then came a loud bang on the back door. Then another on the front. 2 separate knocks. My mind raced. He wasn't alone. Suddenly, the back door creaked open. The chain held, but the gap was wide enough to see movement. A voice rasped, low and cruel. "You think you've won, Clara. But you don't know what I know." "You never did," I shouted. "Go away, Vernon. The police are coming." A wheeze. Then laughter. "You want the truth?" he hissed. "Then come get it." And just like that, he disappeared into the woods. By the time the sheriff and her deputies arrived, he was gone again, like a ghost with muddy boots and bad breath. But he left something behind. A small box on the porch. Inside it, wrapped in old newspaper, was a cassette tape. Labeled, in shaky handwriting, "Michael, final words." I collapsed into my chair, holding the tape to my chest. Charlotte sat beside me, clutching my hand. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "We listen," I said, though my voice was barely a whisper. "We listen to what he left behind. To whatever truth Vernon has been holding over my head all these years." I didn't sleep. The next morning, the sheriff returned with an old cassette player from the station. I pressed play. The tape clicked softly. Static. Then Michael's voice. So clear. So familiar. So heartbreakingly gentle. "If you're hearing this, it means Vernon kept his word. Clara, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to hear it like this." My throat clenched. I did love you. Every day. Every second. But there's something I should have told you, long ago. When I was young, before I met you. I made mistakes. Vernon found out. And he used it to keep me silent. He said if I told you anything, he'd hurt you. Said he'd finish what he started with you when you were a girl. Charlotte gasped beside me. So I stayed quiet. I let Vernon visit me those last days because I thought, maybe if I gave him what he wanted, he'd leave you alone. The tape crackled. I was wrong. I'm sorry. You were always stronger than me. And I hope, somehow, you'll be the one to end him. Silence. Then a soft exhale. And the tape clicked off. I sat there, tears streaming down my face. Michael knew. He knew what Vernon had done to me. And Vernon had used it to control us both. Me through trauma, Michael through guilt. It had been a prison built with secrets and sealed with shame. But now the walls were cracked. Charlotte looked at me, her voice trembling. "It's time, Clara." I nodded. "It's time we ended this." I didn't bother packing a bag. I just took the tape, the letter, the old envelope with Michael's child's photo, and my courage. By the time Sheriff Louise arrived, I was already on the porch with my coat buttoned and keys in hand. Charlotte was beside me. She had that firm, quiet look in her eyes, the kind that tells you someone's crossed too many bridges to turn back now. "Where are you going?" Louise asked, stepping out of her cruiser. Where he's hiding, I replied. Vernon's not running to escape. He's circling, waiting. He's playing his final game, Louise. But I know where he'd go. Louise narrowed her eyes. You think he's gone back to the old Dale family cabin? I nodded. The one up on Copper Ridge. He thinks it's safe. It's the last place he controlled me. I stayed there after my mother died, before I went away. He used to take me hunting up there. But there were no guns. Just his eyes. Louise took a deep breath. We'll follow behind. Keep your phone on. But Clara, if you see him before we arrive, do not engage. I nodded, even though I knew I wouldn't wait. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about closure. The drive to Copper Ridge was long and winding. The trees arched over the road like judgmental sentries, leaves whispering secrets we never told. As the tires crunched through gravel, I felt my heartbeat settle, not out of calm but clarity. I parked just before the cabin cleared. The place looked like something out of time, weathered boards, broken porch swing, a chimney crumbling with age. It hadn't changed. Vernon had never changed either. As I stepped out, the wind carried the faint scent of tobacco. He was here. I tightened my coat and walked slowly toward the porch. The screen door creaked open before I touched it. And there he was, sitting on a chair by the fireplace, as if he'd been waiting. Clara, he croaked. Welcome home. I stepped inside and closed the door gently behind me. My voice was calm. This was never my home, Vernon. You just made me think I didn't deserve better. He chuckled, eyes glinting. Still with the sass, even after all these years. I always liked that about you. I didn't respond. I took a step closer. You knew Michael was dying, I said. You held his fear like a knife. You made him choose silence over truth. Vernon shrugged. People like control. Michael was no different. He had secrets. I had leverage. I reached into my coat and pulled out the cassette. I heard the tape, I said. He wanted me to end this. Vernon's smirk wavered for a second. Then he leaned back, sighing. So what? You gonna kill me, Clara? Finish what the cancer couldn't. No, I said softly. I came here to give you a choice. He arched an eyebrow. You tell the truth, I continued. Everything. In your own words. On tape. You confess what you did. To me, to Charlotte, to Helena, to the women in the nursing home. All of it. And if you do, I walk out that door and never look back. He laughed. And if I don't? I stepped closer. Then I stay, I said. And I make sure your last breath is filled with the sound of every woman you ever hurt, screaming your name in court, in the press, in every home that'll listen. He stared at me for a long time. And for the first time in my life, I saw it. Fear. Not of death. Of irrelevance. Because Vernon thrived on being remembered. Being feared. Being spoken about. Fine, he said hoarsely. Give me the damn recorder. I placed it on the table, clicked record, and watched him fold. He started with my mother. Then me. Then Charlotte, then Helena, then the nurse interns. It poured out of him like tar, sticky, dark, clinging to the air. When he was done, he looked at me and said, You think this makes you the hero? No, I said, taking the recorder. It makes you human, and humans die. But truth lives longer than your lies ever will. Outside, I heard the cruiser tires on gravel. Louise. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch as her car pulled in. I've got the confession, I said, holding up the recorder. She rushed past me. 10 minutes later, Vernon was handcuffed and placed in the back of the cruiser. His head slumped forward, eyes empty. The weight of truth had finally crushed what little remained of his pride. Back home, the sun was setting behind the hills. Benjamin called that evening. "I read the news," he said. "He's finally being charged." "Yes," I replied. "And you, how are you feeling?" He hesitated. Grateful. Confused. But mostly, like I've finally found the other half of a story I didn't know I was in. "Do you want to visit again?" I asked. "I'd love to," he said. "And Clara, thank you for not hiding me." We hung up. Charlotte stayed the night again. As the fireplace crackled, she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Do you feel lighter?" I looked into the flames. "No," I said, "but I feel whole. For the first time in 70 years, I'm not carrying someone else's shame." The next morning, I woke up to a letter at my doorstep. Not from Vernon. From the court. It read, "Thanks to your bravery, other victims have stepped forward. Vernon Dale has been charged with multiple counts of assault, harassment, and coercion. A formal apology is being issued by Willow Pines for their negligence. A fund is being created in your name, for survivors over 60. I cried. Not for me. For every girl who had to become a warrior in silence. And for every woman who still thinks her voice is too late to matter. Because it isn't. It never is." The morning air smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. I stood in my backyard, barefoot in the grass, with the sun warming my face and the wind teasing my hair like I was a girl again. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of my memories. They were still there, painful, jagged, some permanently embedded in my bones, but they didn't own me anymore. They couldn't silence me, because I had spoken, and the world had listened. Vernon was behind bars, and I was free. But freedom is a strange thing at my age. It feels less like a door swinging open and more like a quiet, unexpected breeze. You don't know where it's taking you, but you know you're not trapped anymore. That week, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo album, leather-bound, with "To Clara" embossed in gold. I opened it carefully. The first photo was of Michael, holding a tiny baby, Benjamin, smiling, unaware of the weight of secrets and the cost of silence. The next was Helena, young, tired, but brave. Her handwriting beneath the photo read, "For the woman I never got to thank." Tears filled my eyes. The album was filled with moments I had never lived, but were tied to my life all the same. And at the end, a handwritten note. "You saved my mother from shame. You gave my father the strength to love without speaking. And now, you've given me the truth. I don't know if I'll ever deserve to call you family, but I hope someday you'll let me try. Benjamin." I pressed the note to my chest and wept. Later that afternoon, I met with the women from the nursing home who had also come forward. Charlotte sat beside me as we listened to each story, some whispered, some spoken through clenched teeth, some still trembling with shame. But all of them had one thing in common: they had been silenced. Until now. We formed something right there at that dusty community center, something more than a support group. A sisterhood. A coalition of voices that refused to be buried. We called it the Echo Room, because we believed every woman who's ever been hurt deserves to speak loud enough to hear her own strength echo back. We met every Sunday afternoon after church. We drank weak coffee, passed around photos of grandkids and old memories, and sometimes we cried. But not always from pain. Sometimes from relief. Sometimes from laughter. Because healing isn't a straight road. It's a spiral. And some days, you spin back to the worst place you've ever been, only to realize you're stronger now. One Sunday, after a meeting, Benjamin pulled up in his truck. He had paint under his fingernails and a sandwich in his hand. "I've been thinking," he said, hopping out, "about buying a little land near here. Fixing up a place. Maybe stay for a while." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean putting down roots?" He smiled. "If you'll have me." I laughed. "You don't need my permission, child. But if you're asking for family, then yes. You have me." We hugged. Right there in the gravel parking lot. Weeks passed. Then months. Vernon's trial came and went. He pleaded guilty on 3 counts. Too frail to stand. Too broken to fight. He died 6 weeks into his sentence. Alone. Unmarked. No visitors. No eulogies. And that, I decided, was enough. No revenge. No hatred. Just silence. The kind he had once tried to bury me with, only now it wrapped around him like a casket. One morning, Charlotte and I sat on the porch, drinking sweet tea. The wind was cool, and the sky was pink with dawn. "You ever wish things had been different?" she asked softly. "All the time," I said. "But if they had, maybe I wouldn't have found my voice. Or found you." She smiled, and we clinked our glasses together. "Here's to echoes," she said. "To echoes," I repeated. "And to finally hear them." That night, I wrote a letter. To a girl I used to be. "Dear Clara, I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I let silence become your shield. But I promise you, your voice matters now. I heard you, and I love you. Clara."